Start recording. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back tonight here for our bi-monthly show with my man Lucas Wilder, who is hiding out somewhere in the mountain range of Virginia. We're still looking for him. I'm coming at you from an undisclosed location here in Alabama. We have something different to talk to you tonight. I hope y'all are all ready to enjoy something new. I am. I think it's going to be something very exciting. Lucas, my man, how are you? Thank you for coming back.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Chris. Thank you for having me on again. We're doing something a little different today. Instead of talking about the military tactics and strategy of the Civil War, we're going to move into the politics of Kentucky before the Civil War and a little bit into the Civil War. We're not going to touch a lot on the war itself. We're going to talk about the political ramifications leading up to secession, and as the war's just beginning, what Kentucky's doing politically as opposed to what's happening in the rest of the nation.
So here we go. It's the parties that pick their candidates. You know, Lincoln, Douglas, Breckinridge, and John Bale.
Right now we actually have to go a little bit before then. We're
okay.
gonna hold on. Let's jump in a time machine here.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's jump to the Civil War right quick, just for a moment.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I like the way you're going, but let's jump ahead just a little bit to the Civil War and see that when we look at how many soldiers came out of Kentucky, out of about 100,000 that came out of Kentucky, about 80,000 fought for the Union, while only about 20,000 fought for the Confederacy.
Okay.
People seem to think that Kentucky was divided in its loyalties. It was, but not as much as people might think that they were divided. And so when we are doing that run-up to the election of 1860, the election of 1860 was a pivotal moment in Kentucky's political history.
Okay.
And one thing that we need to keep in mind is Kentucky's geographic location. Kentucky has connections to the entire rest of the country.
Right.
And in the early 1800s, river travel was the main way to get goods to broader markets, either by flatboat trips down the Ohio River, down the Mississippi to New Orleans, and then to broader markets all over the world.
Right.
Traversing those vast river systems was important. However, that linked the state with the rest of the South because of the riverways flowed south. So it had a real tight connection with the South. Additionally,
militarily.
Exactly. Additionally, one of Kentucky's biggest exports was hemp, mostly in the form of rope, and that was
that some people partake of, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the hemp was mainly used for rope, and that rope was actually used to bale cotton in the Deep South. And so this tied Kentucky intimately with the rest of the South.
Okay.
And add on to even that, Kentucky, another of Kentucky's biggest exports was livestock. We have a lot of hogs coming out of Kentucky. I mean, tens of thousands of hogs, cattle, even some flocks of geese were herded out of Kentucky to the Deep South. Most of these hogs that are being sent to the Deep South are being used to feed the enslaved population, which is growing the cotton, which is being baled by Kentucky hemp, that's being sent to New Orleans to be sent to textile mills in the North and in Europe. Wow. So, I mean, Kentucky is a global economic hub.
That's what I was going to say. So Kentucky, the way you just explained it, I mean, could theoretically just about crash the world's economy.
Oh, they were a significant driver of the economy of the world. That might be a tiny bit of an overstatement, but it can't be overstated that Kentucky was an economic driver of the country. It was geographically placed right in the center, right between North and South. And so both sides wanted Kentucky. I know we're jumping to the Civil War at that point, but both sides valued Kentucky for an economic location.
Okay.
And once we get into, moving into the 1800s, railroads are becoming a main thing. And
Right.
so Kentucky's goods are not simply going down the Mississippi River at this point. They're being transported north along these railroad systems. And of course, the North has a more intricate railroad system than the South does. The position of Kentucky made it easy to get cattle and hogs, particularly hogs is what you're eating for meat. Cattle doesn't become a main food source for the United States until McDonald's emerges in the 1950s. So it's hog meat. And since Cincinnati is becoming this huge meat industry hub, a meat city, if you will, and all these Kentucky hogs are going up towards Cincinnati and being slaughtered there as well. And so when the railroads come into play, now Kentucky is connected firmly with both North and South. And that plays a significant role when we move into the election of 1860. But we're not there yet, but it plays a significant role. Its economic ties do.
Okay. Before we go into that 1860, leading up to 1860, maybe election 1852, 56, congressional races, were the candidates already seeing how vital this was going to be economically to the country?
Kentucky is seen as a main economic hub for the country. Both North and South, all states realize how valuable Kentucky is. One thing that people don't realize that both Virginia and Kentucky in this instance have a close tie with the Deep South, in that as Virginia and Kentucky are slowly losing their slave population, the way they're losing it is that they're selling slaves to the Deep South. And Kentucky's making a really good profit off this, because if we remember in the 18 teens, the African slave trade is cut off, and so now there's no slaves coming from Africa. Now they're actually having to be brought into the domestic slave trade, and so that boosted the price of all enslaved persons in Virginia and in Kentucky when they're sold to the Deep South. And so Kentucky and Virginia is making a killing off of this, literally and figuratively, and leads some historians to even talk about slave breeders that emerge in Virginia, that their sole purpose is to actually produce slaves reproductively and sell to the Deep South. Although there's still research being done on that, can you say there's firmly slave breeders, and as that is a actual economic designation? We're a little bit iffy on how to describe that, but there's definitely people who take that as a role for themselves, if not a title of themselves.
Okay, so
and just to jump back, the politics of the mid 1800s. We can't talk about the politics of the mid 1800s without mentioning Kentucky's greatest politician at the time, and possibly Kentucky's greatest politician in history, which is Henry Clay.
My son, my best friend actually named his son after him. Why, I don't know, because it wasn't like a huge Henry Clay fan. He just liked the name. I thought that was just a cute story.
Hey, it's a good name, and Henry Clay is, as I describe him, the greatest politician of the 19th century to never become president. I mean, he is an incredible politician. He had worked tirelessly throughout the first half of that century to hold the country together through compromises, especially over the institution of slavery, like the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850. Clay rose to prominence as a politician right before the War of 1812, where he was a Jeffersonian or a Democratic Republican. They were also called National Republicans, especially when the War of 1812 and the Hartford Convention did away with the Federalist Party. This left only one party in the United States, which was the National Republicans, and a branch of them called the Old Republicans. And that stayed the same until the Democrats emerged in the 1820s. Clay would be a founding member of the Whig Party, which was an opposition to Andrew Jackson's Democrat Party. And his political power and prestige led him to hold multiple political positions, from congressman to senator to secretary of state. He held a lot of political positions, and people all over the country knew him. As long as Clay lived, Kentucky was solidly a Whig state. But in the early
Really?
1850s, until the early
It
1850s, the
was a
Whig
Whig
Party
state?
began.
Huh.
Yeah,
I,
Kentucky was a Whig state all the way up until the 1850s when Henry Clay passes away.
he died in 1850. Was that right, or was that Andrew? Or was that Calhoun?
I'm blank on the exact date. It's
I think
1852, 1854, somewhere around that.
I
Because
think
he's
Clay died. I'm sorry. I think Clay died in. You're right. Clay died in 54, and Calhoun died in 50. Um, I think. I'm sorry. It's neither here nor there, really. But I
uh,
interrupted you. I'm
oh
sorry.
no, oh no problem. In the early 1850s, once Clay passes away, the Whig Party is already on the downhill slope. It's starting to fade away. It's breaking into a bunch of different pieces. And one of those pieces is the Republican Party. It became the main opponent to the Democrats. And so Kentucky, in its own way, had been what I call a compromise state. Its main politician, Henry Clay, was known as the Great Compromiser. It always sat kind of evenly divided in this
Was
in the
the
political
Democratic
balance.
Party beginning to unify during this time?
What do you mean by unify?
You know how, like, let me explain. See if I can explain it, like, in terms of a few years, well, in our lifetime, where you had the Southern Democrats and you had the Rockefeller Republicans, and and then they went away, where you had solid conservative Republicans versus and solid liberal Democrats. I mean, so was the Democratic Party beginning to unify and become stronger as a group, as opposed to what they were facing?
What we're going to see as far as the 1850s and well, let's just say the whole 1800s in American politics is Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats are slowly pulling away. They were actually
Right.
more, it could be argued that they were more unified in the 1830s and 1840s, but by the 1850s, as Southern Democrats are pushing more and more for more political power, and the Northern Democrats are becoming more and more anti-slavery. They start pushing away their northern brethren, the Southern Democrats do, and so it's actually dividing more. And so we see that when we get to the election of 1860, the Republicans are starting to consolidate, and the election of 1856 is the first election that the Republicans put up a political candidate for the presidency.
Fremont, right?
Yep, John C. Fremont. Um, he does remarkably well. Even though he loses, he does remarkably well for a first-time political party to throw a candidate up there. And so this gives them a big boost of confidence to continue on pushing for, more national, more political positions and running more elections. And they are definitely making headway in the North. And so we see a lot of Northern Democrats will start switching sides and start going towards the Republicans, not as much, and sometimes not as much as they are agreeing completely with the politics, but they are getting bullied by the Southern Democrats saying you have to do this. And as Southern Democrats are losing political power, the Southerners start lashing out, and that's when we get like the caning of Charles Sumner. And so it's a unique time in American political history.
When you look at the election in 1860, and you look at how close with Lincoln and Douglas, Douglas was not an abolitionist. Why did the Democrats take that chance to divide their votes between those two men when you're cutting your own throat? I mean,
Southern Democrats didn't trust Stephen Douglas. He had, let's move back to when Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln are running for the Senate in 1858. They have this amazing debate. The pamphlets, the transcription from the debate are disseminated around the country. People hear what Douglas has said about slavery, even though he's not a slave owner, he's not a proponent of slavery itself, but he is a Southern sympathizer in that he's okay with it existing. And he makes some comments. Some of them are implied and some of them are a little bit more overt, but he made comments that threatened the institution of slavery to Southern Democrats. And that's one reason that they break away from Douglas. Now there's a bigger story, and that would actually take another probably another interview to do, is the Democratic conventions, and that's conventions with an S, because they did have two separate conventions when they couldn't agree on a political candidate to put up.
Let's say that have an interview about that, because I'd like to tell the readers how Lincoln actually got the nomination. So we'll save that one.
Oh gosh, that is a great topic. Lincoln getting the nomination, and let's just do all the candidates for the election of 1860 and how they got put up as the candidate, because all of them are neat.
So that was also a story about the way I heard how Lincoln got that. But anyway, we'll save that one. But go ahead. So yeah, the question I was asking you. Okay, so here we are, and if hopefully I didn't cut you off when you was telling something.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So here we are, and me and you just had a discussion a while ago, and we understand politics and stuff like this. So here Douglas is. He's in the fight of his political life. He knows that he's already lost the South because he's not going to carry the Southern states. Breckinridge is going to get it. Why does he go to the South and campaign? Because I don't think he knew is just get Roach from Breckinridge. Why does he not fight it out with Lincoln in the North? Because he's getting death threats, he's getting booed, he's getting, he was not wanted there. Why does he not try to consolidate and win the fight there? And at least, maybe if he doesn't get the electoral votes, throw it in the House?
That's an awesome question. I'll answer that one by talking about one other thing. So we're going to come at it at a side angle. So bear with me for just a moment.
Sure, of course.
So just for people that might not be aware, the candidates for the presidential election of 1860 is Abraham Lincoln for the Republican Party. He's from Illinois, although he was born in Kentucky. Hits right in with our topic today. John C. Breckinridge, also from Kentucky, but lives there at this time. He's the Southern Democratic Party candidate. Stephen Douglas, he's from Illinois. He's the Northern Democratic Party candidate. And then we've got a dark horse, which is John Bell. He's from Tennessee, but he's part of the Constitutional Unionist Party. One historian claimed that the Constitutional Unionists shared a somewhat pathetic hope that repeated reference to the sanctity of the Constitution and the Union would somehow solve the problems confronting the state and the nation. He says it's pathetic. I think it's a little bit better than pathetic, to say the least. So why is and you mentioned it just a few moments ago, Douglas is going all over the South trying to elicit a strong vote for himself in the South. Why is he not concentrating on the places in the North? People around the country have known Stephen Douglas for a long time. He's been on the national stage for quite a while in his lifetime. He's one of these influential workers on the Compromise of 1850 with Henry Clay. So people know him. He's got national appeal.
Kind of like maybe like and I hate to just throw a name out there like this, but kind of like a Bob Dole candidate back in the day when he was running and everybody knew who he was. I mean, I'm not trying to compare the two men, their politics, but everybody knew who Bob Dole was.
Just comparing their popularity, or at least their familiarity with the public. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Yes. And so what we see that he only wins 1.5 states back when there's a fusion ticket, and he wins half of New Jersey. Stephen Douglas does. He only wins 1.5 states. John Bell wins Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. Goes back to our main topic. And then Breckinridge wins the rest of the southern states, and Abraham Lincoln solid wins the North and the West. Now, what people don't realize is, yes, Stephen Douglas won 1.5 states in the Electoral College, but he was second in the popular vote.
I mean, we're talking a few thousand votes in some of these states. That
Exactly.
He was close.
Exactly. And he was hoping that his influence in the North, but particularly in the state of Illinois where he was coming from, because he had won the Senate. He had won the Senate race in 1858. Why wouldn't they vote for him as president? I think for some of it is actually he took it for granted that he was going to get a bunch of northern states, and that he didn't need to campaign as much. But he campaigned his heart out in the South. I mean, he was doing speeches almost every single day. And we suspect that's probably what led to him passing away shortly afterwards. He had just ran himself ragged trying to instill any kind of voting, try to get any votes for himself in those areas.
Do you think this would be and I know it's just one state, but this would be a fair or somewhat similar comparison that in 2000, and I hope listeners are not thinking I'm picking one can and another. I'm just analyzing politics. Al Gore spent all of his time in Florida, where his brother was governor, instead of his home state of Tennessee that he lost by 20,000 votes, trying to get votes in Florida when you should have spent your time at home. Do you understand what I meant with that question?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat of a fair comparison. It's where are you spending your most time at is the places you think that you're going to need the most. And so Stephen Douglas thinks he's going to need more of the Southern vote. He's trying to convince the Southern Democrats that he's the better candidate, especially as far as someone that's going to protect their rights.
How can he think that he can convince them to vote against their native son? I mean,
he's banking on his reputation from the Compromise of 1850 and all the things he has put forward. Especially, he was one of those constructors of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was popular sovereignty, which was going to allow slavery to expand into the Western territories. He's hoping that convinces them, hey, this man's on board. He's a tried and true candidate that we have seen in office do all these things on our account. And so that's probably where he's coming from.
Okay. Do you think he would have done better had he concentrated on maybe a handful of states like a Kentucky, a Tennessee, a Virginia, instead of being in Alabama and Mississippi, in states like that?
I think actually he would have been better off trying to campaign in the North.
Well, I mean, I do too. I obviously do too. I'm just saying if he was going to do that, because I'm looking at, when you look at the votes in the North, and you're talking about there's a handful. A lot of people don't realize this right here. Lincoln lost his home county twice, and I've not been able to verify this yet. I'm still looking for it, but in the second time, he only won Springfield by 6 votes. So I'm with you. I would have spent my time in Illinois. I mean, they're not in Illinois, in the North, to try to do that, because the thing, I want to go back to the South. I think Virginia was the only state Lincoln was on. So it's not like you're going to try to split enough votes to win a couple states and throw it in the House. You've got to defeat Breckinridge straight up in the South. So whoever was running his campaign, made a horrible decision. And one tidbit I'd like to throw in there, I don't know if you're aware of it, but why, it doesn't, I've never figured out why he was there, but the night where he got the returns that he lost the election, he was in Mobile, the oldest hotel in Mobile. And I could never, and maybe you know why, but I never figured out why he was in Mobile getting the returns.
He's on campaign. He was still campaigning.
Well, he was campaigning up until the day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He was
Great.
campaigning all the way up until the day. He made a speech the night before, trying to get people to get that last minute votes in.
And I'll have to go back and look at them, but I don't know if they was even close. A lot of his votes in the South. Again, I'll have to just go back and look of how it went. As far as Kentucky, where's Kentucky at? I mean, did they have pro secession, pro union? Is their governor pro session? Legislature, anti secession. What is Kentucky thinking? Because with them being the economic hub, they've got a lot of power. They got a lot of bargaining power here. What's going on through their mind?
Well, Bell beat Breckinridge in the state by about 13,000 votes, which is a good lead. It's a good solid lead for them, especially with the amount of votes that you could get cast in the state. And so once these states start leaving, the governor of Kentucky is Bry Magoffin. He was the governor of Kentucky and elected in 1859, so he's fairly new at the job. In 1860, all this has taken place. He was a defender of slavery and believed that secession was legal, even though you read his letters, sometimes he's very pro-secessionist, sometimes he's a little less so, but we can always say he at least had a lot of Southern sympathies. So the governor is a Southern sympathizer. He did attempt to coordinate multiple conventions in order to bring both sides to the national table in a compromise. Another one that did.
You mean both, like the federal government and Southern government, the whole country? The whole country. Is that what you mean?
The whole country, both politicians from North and South, bring them to the table and say, "Hey, we got to work this out."
Statesmen.
And so John J. Crittenden was also one of these Kentucky politicians who is kind of following the steps of Henry Clay. Hey, let's work this out. We need to compromise here. There's no use of breaking the country apart. But all these attempts are going to fail. And Lincoln's going to call for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion after the firing on Fort Sumter. Kentucky was asked to fill 4 regiments for their quota. Magoffin said, and I've got the quote here, "I say emphatically, Kentucky will furnish no troops for the wicked purpose of subduing her sister Southern states." Crittenden made the statement that Kentucky has not seceded, and I believe never will. She loves the Union and will cling to it as long as possible, and so I hope you will. God knows what is to be in the end. The Kentucky House of Representatives declared that this state and the citizens thereof shall take no part in the Civil War now being waged, except as mediators and friends to the belligerent parties, and that Kentucky should, during the contest, occupy a position of strict neutrality. And one historian,
I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off. Was there ever a formal vote of secession by Kentucky, or was it just?
Well, we will get there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's a little bit late. The odd thing is that comes much later. That secessionist rise in Kentucky.
And I cut you off too much, so I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. One historian jokingly stated that an observer from the outside looking in would have thought that the United States had become 3 countries: the Union, the Confederacy, and Kentucky. Abraham Lincoln famously stated that to lose Kentucky would be to lose the whole war. And he allowed the state to declare its neutrality and to somewhat abide by that neutrality. However, having Kentucky as a neutral state is weird. That's like saying when we go into World War II that Kansas decides they don't want to give any troops to the war effort. It can't be done. A state can't declare its neutrality. But Lincoln allows that to happen because he knows that
the South to secede, but Kentucky to remain neutral. Now, my question then: did Kentucky have to fall up under federal laws, or did he let them just run their state as an independent state or independent nation?
A little bit of both. It's a little weird. The Kentucky Senate will finally approve neutrality on May 20th, 1860. So they officially declare their neutrality. And But within the state of Kentucky, military
1860 or 61?
in 61, May
Okay.
20th, 1861, and so the state of Kentucky starts organizing military forces into kind of their own little army. Even though all the military forces in Kentucky were supposed to be part of the same political endeavor, i.e., neutrality, when one joined a group, they knew which side they favored. So,
Was
for
this
example,
supposed
the
military
Kentucky
force a defense force for their own? Was it supposed? I'm sorry. Was it supposed to be a Kentucky defense force, like their own army in case they was invaded?
yes,
Was that
depending on
okay?
who was going to invade them.
Right. Gotcha. I'm
Yes.
following.
And the Kentucky and future General, Confederate General Simon Bolivar Buckner formed the state guards. They were pro-secession, so you knew that if you were a pro-secessionist Kentuckian and you wanted to join the Confederate cause, but not leave your state and go against what your state wished, you joined Buckner's group. A lot of the local home guards and the militias raised by other groups were, for the most part, pro-Union. And so we see, even when it's declaring its neutrality, they're still picking sides within the state. William Bull Nelson, who would become a Union general, and he's a Kentuckian as well, gets 5,000 rifles for the Union cause and distributes them to loyal Kentuckians. Politically, Kentuckians were picking sides. In the elections for the state legislature, Congress, and Senate, Unionists won overwhelmingly. It was not looking good for the secessionists who were hoping to gain the legislature in order to pass an ordinance of secession. So when the elections in 1861, they happened in the summer of 1861, when the Kentuckians start voting in Unionists, that kind of is the writing on the wall that secession in Kentucky is not going to fly. They're not going to be able to bring Kentucky out of the Union.
Now,
It's going to stay.
In some states, like in my state, Alabama, northern Alabama was not a hotbed for secession, because they didn't have a lot of slaves. Kentucky, was there an area? I'm sure the mountain areas were not hotbed for secessions, but was it divided like, East Tennessee, West Virginia? Was there an area that was just no secession? We don't want anything to do with this, and then there was the hardcore secessionists.
There is, and you see, and Kentucky is a unique is a horse of a different color when it comes to politics, and sometimes it doesn't fall along slave lines. There's a gentleman that's in central Kentucky near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, who's a nice, prosperous slave owner, yet he is horribly against secession. He does not agree that they should leave the Union and joins the Union cause later in his life. One of his sons joins the Confederacy, one of his sons joins the Union. It's sometimes it's not that simple. It's a very nuanced topic. In general, you can say in general, you can say in the mountains of southeastern Kentucky, they're not pro-secession in general. Now, there's always people that you can point to that say, "Hey, look here, they were for the Confederacy." Yes, but in general, they were not for secession. And one thing I try to do in my own work, in my dissertation, is to show that a lot of these Kentuckians, they're not even pro-unionist in some instances. They're what I call anti-Confederates. I kind of steal that term from Victoria Bynum, who writes about Mississippi and their unionist tendencies in the southeastern part of Mississippi.
Tell me about the anti-Confederates. I don't think I've ever heard that.
Anti-Confederates they're basically, well, the area that I talk about, southeastern Kentucky, right around the Cumberland Gap area, once Confederate armies are the first armies to actually go into those areas. And they go in and they raid farmhouses, raid barns, and they are fed up with Confederate forces going in and stealing their livelihood. And so they help Union soldiers they help Union armies by being scouts, but they don't want to join the Union Army. They will help it, undoubtedly. They'll help the Union Army, but they do not want to join the Union Army, but they're willing to help in any way they can to defeat the Confederates who they are, who did them wrong earlier in the war. So that's what I refer to as anti-Confederates.
So if you was to guess, because you talked about anti-secession and secessionists and unionists. What would you say the percentage was, if you was to guess, that was pro-secession and anti-secession?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I'll use the numbers I used earlier to kind of answer that question. Out of about the 100,000 Kentuckians who joined the Civil War, 80,000 was for the Union, 20,000 for the Confederacy. So it's about an 80-20 split.
4/5 of people. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
80%
Okay.
for the
That's fair enough.
Union, 20% for the Confederacy, roughly. And that I'm extrapolating some other data, but I think that'll partially hold up. Now,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Now, did Kentucky, in some of their counties, did they have their own little civil wars where they fought?
Yeah, a lot of these people, sometimes you find what happened in Missouri also happened in Kentucky, where neighbors just waiting to even the odds on a bad deal they might have happened before the war ever took place, will, in the name of the Union or in the name of the Confederacy, attack their neighbors in order to get even with something that their neighbor had done to them. So they will have little mini civil wars within the state of Kentucky, just like they did in Missouri. Although Missouri is a much more prominent, I think, a much more prevalent place for that to happen. You see that happen throughout the entire South, northern Georgia, northern Alabama, East Tennessee, western North Carolina, Southwest Virginia, all those areas. Similar things happen.
Was there ever any incidences, and those would be probably small, but we talked about the guy was against secession, but not going to invade my sister South. Did you have people like that who was against secession, but when they seen things start to go wrong in the South, that they start getting pissed off and now they're ready to go fight?
Yeah, when the Civil War breaks out and different things happen, different atrocities happen, then they start taking sides, which brings us right into the next topic of, once these little armies in Kentucky start forming up, it's not very long. They survive the summer of 1861 still being neutral, but in early September, Leonidas Polk, who's in command of these Confederate forces in the western part of Tennessee and Mississippi, they invade. They take over Columbus, Kentucky. That's a vital point on the Mississippi River. But when they invade, this sets off a chain reaction. Kentuckians say, hey, wait, we were supposed to be neutral. What are you doing? Get out of the state. Jefferson Davis writes to Polk and everybody saying, what have you done? We're not supposed to invade. This was a buffer zone that was going to protect the Confederacy from any attacks in the western portion of the country. Eventually, it kind of gets settled that, well, we've invaded, we've got to go with it. And so an entire just an invasion force goes into Kentucky. We see the Confederate defensive line in the west, which goes from Columbus to Bowling Green to Cumberland Gap. That's the Confederate defensive line. Once Leonidas Polk rolls into Kentucky, the rest go with him. And that ends the neutrality of Kentucky.
And that was going to be my question. When that happened, when Bragg was there, why not go all in? I mean, commit everything you got in the theater and try to take it.
Well, that's a little bit later. They don't have there is all kinds of small military forces in Kentucky. And again, they're very, very careful with how they're treating Kentucky.
Okay.
This wasn't a planned invasion, by like a wholehearted invasion. This was one small section of the Confederate Army goes in and wrecks the whole political plans for Jefferson Davis of having Kentucky act as a buffer zone. And once they go in, then they set up the defensive line. Kentucky's not left the Union, so they don't want to go deep into Kentucky. They're going to try to protect Tennessee as best as possible. So they move into Kentucky a few miles and set up those defenses in, like I said, Columbus, Bowling Green, and Cumberland Gap.
Okay.
Now, once that happens, Kentucky goes firmly with the Union. There's no way they're going to be joining the Confederacy at this point. So we see later that year in 1861, a bunch of secessionists from the state of Kentucky go to Russellville, Kentucky, and they select state legislatures, and they choose a governor. His name is George W. Johnson, and they established its capital, the Kentucky capital for the Confederacy, in Bowling Green, because that's where Albert Sidney Johnston, the commander of the Western Theater,
That's
is.
right.
That's where
I
he's in
forgot they
control.
had two capitals.
Yep, and Johnston leaves in February 1862. He pulls out of Bowling Green. Grant and the Union forces are moving into Kentucky and moving on into Tennessee, and they capture Nashville. And so the Kentucky Confederate government travels with the Army of Tennessee, basically. Or it's not the Army of Tennessee at that point, it's the Army of the Mississippi, but it travels with that Western Army, and the governor travels with it. And at the Battle of Shiloh, the governor of Kentucky gets killed, and they have to re-elect another governor. His name is Richard Hawes, Hawes, Richard Hawes, and he's the next governor. He's the last Confederate governor for the state of Kentucky. He travels with Braxton Bragg and the Army of Tennessee, but he will eventually settle in Virginia, where he can be close to Jefferson Davis, talk with the president, and be closer to the powers of government. But it's what some historians have called a shadow government inside of the Confederacy for a state that never officially left the Union, and they basically did it illegally because they just grabbed a couple of legislatures and themselves elected a governor.
Huh. I'm learning so much, more about the importance of Kentucky. I've always heard that, Lincoln saying that, but it never really dawned, on me, how important Kentucky was, in that, which it brought a question to me, and I may be jumping a little bit ahead here. When they had the Heartland invasion. And maybe the South was worried about repercussions. Why didn't they just start laying waste to everything? You're not coming with us. We're going to make sure we destroy you economically where you cannot benefit anything in the North.
Well, the intention was when Bragg invaded Kentucky in the Heartland Campaign, or the Kentucky Campaign of 1862, the idea that Braxton Bragg and Jefferson Davis had worked out was that Kentucky had a bunch of secessionists. But they had it in their mind that secessionists were all over Kentucky, and all they needed was a Confederate army to come in to the state, and they would rally. They might get 30,000 new soldiers from Kentucky just just by invading the state. They go into the state with the intention of being friends with the state. Once they get in there, they realize there's no one coming. The 1,000 or so troops that actually do flock to the Confederate Army, many of them desert before they even get out of the state after the Battle of Perryville.
Basically, their plans and I'm sorry to cut you out. Basically, their strategy or their delusional thinking was the same thing in Maryland. When the army comes, they're going to flock to our side, and we're going to have all these troops and to come to our aid. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. They thought that once you invade, you're going to get a whole bunch of troops. I may have overstated the 30,000, but they did think thousands of soldiers were going to come to the Confederate ranks just by going into the state. And Bragg will actually take the Kentucky governor, Richard Hawes, with him and install him as governor forcefully, using the Confederate Army to forcefully install him, have a little, I don't think they get to have the parade. The Union Army's approaching them too quickly, but they install him as governor of Kentucky. He doesn't get to stay there. They have to leave. They're not going to put up with that.
This made the people of Kentucky and Maryland mad when they came in, right? Because I mean, just my thinking is, I've not seen too many, armies invade somebody's state and then them all be happy and go join the ranks. It seems to me like the Marylanders in Kentucky, they got pissed off when this happened.
They did, and it was a tactical mistake politically for the Confederacy to invade Kentucky. It didn't do anything for them. Now, if by some chance Bragg could have defeated Don Carlos Buell in Kentucky, I don't see it happening. He was fairly outnumbered and was not going to work with Edmund Kirby Smith in this. If he could have defeated him, the fact of the matter is Kentucky was a pro-Union state. They were not going to leave the Union, especially by just a Confederate army coming in. And when Bragg leaves, he takes somewhere around 20,000 head of cattle out of Kentucky that they basically stole to feed the Army of Tennessee.
Let's play a hypothetical here.
Okay.
Let's say that, Bragg had some more men and, there was something numerically even. And Bragg pulls off a Chickamauga where he just routs the army and, half of them are ended up in Indiana and just a handful of there. What happens then?
What happens if Bragg actually wins a major victory and scatters the Union Army in Kentucky? We would have seen troops that were left in Nashville, Tennessee, probably invade the state. There's plenty of troops. There's troops that are just on the other side of the Ohio River in Indiana and Ohio. Not a lot. I'm just saying there's some. The Union Army has great railroads. They're going to pop in as many troops as possible. And don't forget, Grant is in Mississippi. At this point, he's still trying to take Vicksburg. He may even be brought up. It's not going to change anything with the politics of Kentucky. It may it might have a harsh blow on Lincoln's administration, but to survive in Kentucky would be very difficult for the Confederate Army, especially with all the people that are anti-Confederates within the state. And they find that out because as Bragg is leaving the state, there are bushwhackers that attack his army as they're moving through the state.
I did not know that at all. But Kentucky is that important that they would have poured those kind of resources into it to retake the state?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln would have thrown every Union soldier he had to regain Kentucky. When he said that to lose Kentucky was to lose the whole war, he meant it. He knew how valuable it was.
Do you believe, honestly, they would have lost that war had they lost Kentucky?
That's a good question. Depends on what you mean by lost. If Kentucky went politically for the Confederacy, possibly.
Not outright. Let me say it like this, right? Because I don't think the Confederacy was never going to actually defeat the North like the North defeated the South. There just wasn't. They had to not lose. Let's just say, when I say lose, if they got Kentucky, would that made it impossible for the North to defeat the Confederacy in a way where they totally conquered them? Does that ask the question better, or do I need to try to rephrase it?
Well, maybe you have to rephrase it a little bit, but I think I know what you're saying. So let me see if I can answer it right now, and if I didn't, we can rephrase it. I don't foresee losing Kentucky as a state to the Union as being a huge boost to the Confederacy that they would be able to hold off until the North basically gave up. I don't foresee that happening. If we're saying that Kentucky politically went with the Confederacy, they definitely would have had a much better a chance at surviving the Confederacy, that is, if they would have had those 80,000 Confederate troops rather than the 20,000 that they got. So if politically they switched, absolutely. But if we're just looking at gaining the state, I still don't think it would have changed much.
Okay. I probably didn't ask it right, but you answered the question on what I was talking about. If the Confederate, because Lincoln said, if we don't hold Kentucky, we lose the war, but that's what I was talking about. If the Confederacy was to take Kentucky, and just take it, would that have caused them? Would they have won the war? Now the 80,000 men is different, but yes, you answered the question perfectly. How I, what I was asking. So,
a neat little thing to think about is if the Confederacy does have an army in Kentucky and they have their army in Mississippi, having that much of a distance between Union armies may have actually helped the Confederacy out in that respect. If we're seeing if that would have helped the Confederacy in any way, having the Union armies that far apart and may have and made them cross a river and be contested all the time on the Ohio River, that might have made some significant difference, especially militarily. But I don't foresee it with Abraham Lincoln's brown water navy, as the steamboats running up the rivers were called. I don't foresee that happening.
And I've got a good one for you, because I love my hypotheticals, and maybe this could be a one of your shows for you. Let's say the Confederacy takes it, and they got 90,000 men to the 10,000 Union, and they've got a 90,000 man army there. Where do they go next? Do they go into Ohio? I mean, do they hold still? Do they, they've got free reign. There's a lot of places they can go.
There's a lot of Confederates that are talking about invading Ohio and Indiana. That's one reason that you see John Hunt Morgan make his ride up through Indiana and Ohio. Is a lot of them have aspirations to invade even Longstreet when he's got independent command in late 63, early 64 in East Tennessee. He's talking about invading Kentucky and maybe further. And so a lot of Confederates have that idea that if they can take the war to the north, they can make the American citizens, the citizens of the Union, to call for the war to end. And I think that's one of their best bets. If they were going to win, they needed to make the war personal with the Union citizens that are not experiencing conflict on their home territory.
I like to do these things, and I don't know if you've ever seen me write them up, but I'll do this, prove me wrong. And, one of the things that I said is the Confederacy, just what you said, they needed to make it personal. I said, Mosby, Contrail, those guys, they were not used were not used in the right way. They should have been unleashed on the north, pillaging towns, burning livestock, destroying things, taking the war to them. And, you take the war to them, it makes it more personal. You use them in the right way, they got a better chance to win the war, than I say, prove me wrong. And that's what I was saying. If they would have taken it to the war in 1861, it was still fresh, instead of 1863, when, so much of the South was occupied. I think you've got a game changer.
Well, you got two things that happen. Two things can happen if you do that. And I use the South as an example. If you have people going to the South, like we had people going to the South, the Union did, and they ransacked areas. This creates two different kinds of people. You have the people that are saying the war has gone too far, we need to end it right now. And so we see Confederate women gain a lot of political power by calling on the Confederate government to say, hey, we need protection. Something needs to be done. The war has gone too far at this point. And then you got the other ones who are kind of like Newton Knight, who is running roughshod in Mississippi as a Confederate deserter, and he's harassing the Confederate armies. Those two things would happen. If you have an invasion of the North, you're going to have those two same kinds of groups of people emerge in the North as you did in the South. Now, where that will take you is, a question left up to history if that ever happened, which it didn't, but hypothetically. But that's what's going to emerge. That's what's going to come out of that equation.
That's a very good analogy. I've never really thought about that aspect of it with the Southern women. I always just thought of it as the Northern people, because I thought they would probably lose the will to fight quicker than the Southern people did. And I'm not knocking the Northern people for that. I'm just saying that the Southern people, with the way the war was started and carried on, that the Northern, and with the Copperheads up there, that they might have lost the will to continue to going on, as opposed to some of the Southerners did. again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can only speculate.
Well, we can see that the Confederacy set up almost a police state, especially in Mississippi and Alabama. When Polk was transferred out into Mississippi and Alabama and gave control over that district, he gave free rein to Confederate forces there. If someone is conscripted and they don't go into the army, they can be shot on sight or
Really,
executed.
in
And
Alabama, because I'm from I'm right from above Birmingham. I live in Blount County, and I did not know that they gave them the right to shoot Alabamians for not joining the war effort.
yeah, it happened multiple times. Polk was completely, well, I won't say he's completely fine with it, but he didn't object to it. It was a pretty rough time. And so we see a lot of dissent in the South. And there's actually an entire historiography of scholars who write about dissent within the Confederacy and what impact that had on the outcome of the war. It was very significant. I've even got a video on the channel about
What's the
Confederate
name
women.
of it? I want to look at. Okay.
Yeah, it's about
I'll
Confederate women and their political power they gained from the war actually being a very brutal war when the Union armies invade, and how they gain political power by saying, hey, we're supposed to be protected by the government. You've taken our sons and our husbands and our fathers. Now we need you to help us. And so they actually gained political power by using the war against the Confederate government. And some actually fought against the Confederacy when their sons or husbands were killed. They
That's
had
amazing. I
harsh
did not know
resentment.
that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I don't know because like in I'm in more north central Alabama, and all of our plantations were down south. Northern Alabama, where I'm from, yes, excuse me, I had plenty of family that fought for the Confederacy, but for the most part, as far as the secession one, they didn't want that war. Winston County, not too far from me, they seceded from everybody. The northern counties in Alabama who had very few slaves, they didn't want any part of it. And there's a myth that everybody in the South wanted to secede, and that just wasn't true.
Well, I have another video that asks the question, how popular was secession? That's the title of the video. How popular was secession? And I use the book Confederate Reckoning by Stephanie McCurry. She writes a wonderful book about she includes a lot of it. One chapter is solidly about how the Confederates, the secessionists, the fire eaters in the South, actually rigged some elections in order to make secession possible within their state. And she points specifically to Georgia, but she says it probably happened in a bunch of other states as well.
The states that actually voted not to secede, and they rigged the vote.
Yeah, well, they had voter suppression and things like that stifled the unionist vote.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. And I wanted to bring this up before I let you go, because I know we've already went over our time, and I hate doing that to you. But I could probably listen to you for like Shelby Foote for 15 hours. You're the most amazing. And I can tell you something. We cut camera in a minute, but what was I just saying? This is a vote, secession vote in Alabama. Me being an Alabamian, and people's asked me, because I said something about one time talking about the war, and I said, well, and this guy goes, what do you mean we? He goes, are you a Confederate? And I said, well, yeah, I'm from Alabama. And it took him by surprise. And I said, look, I'm from Alabama. I said, whatever they did, I said, I'm going to stand by my state. So I look at some of these people that, like Breckinridge, he fought for the Confederacy, but his state was Kentucky. I mean, if there was a war that broke out and Alabama did not secede, and even though I may have believed in the reason, but if Alabama didn't go, I couldn't go fight against Alabama.
Well, we see a lot of Kentuckians come out and splinter off. We've got Simon Bolivar Buckner, Confederate general. We got Jefferson Davis, Confederate president. We've
Wow.
got Abraham Lincoln, United States president.
Mhm.
Albert Sidney Johnston was born in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. It's John C. Breckinridge, former United States vice president in the United States,
Yeah.
becomes a Confederate general. We've got a bunch of Kentuckians who split the state. And again, the two presidents of the competing nations are both from Kentucky, or at least
Well, I
born
think
there.
I think that's so neat. I mean, but I just and I heard Shelby Foote say that one time, and Shelby Foote said, and he said, I don't. He said Mississippi's my home. He said I don't care what it was, but I can't fight against Mississippi. He said no matter what the cause was. He said I would boo Mississippi, and that's just how I look at it with Alabama. I mean, it's just where my people were born, and that's where they're buried, and I couldn't see myself leading an army of invasion against Alabama. Um, no matter what they did, and I've just always wondered how, some people left to go fight against their home, and I guess every man's loyalty lies somewhere, and that's only for them to be at peace with. It's not for me to judge, if that makes sense.
A good example is George Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga. He's from
Yeah.
Virginia, and Virginia secedes, and he does not go with it. His family ostracize him, exile him from the family, basically never talk to him again because he joined the Union. It happened all over the South and parts of the North. Some Northerners, very few of them, but they did join the Confederacy.
Yes, there were a few. There's a painting that, and you've probably seen it, and I love it. And I forgot if it's called The Final Decision or the Night Before or something, but it shows. But Leah's standing, looking at the fireplace, and he's just staring. And the next day is when he's resigning his commission, and you're looking at it, and I'm thinking, what's going on through his head. And as I'm sitting there and I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, if Virginia does not secede, does he invade the South? And I don't think he would have fought against the South if Virginia had stayed in the Union. I think he would have resigned his commission. Now, I could be wrong.
I'm actually doing a little bit of research on this because I'm going to do a video over it about Lee's loyalties, and it's a very more nuanced topic than people give it credit for. And so I want to give a good, probably about a 15-minute video describing what Robert E. Lee's going through when he's having to decide on which side to go to. And so I'm still in the middle of the research, so I can't fully answer that question right now.
And I don't want you to. I want you to say that, because I want to get all of it, and one thing I'm basing it off of is in Gods and Generals, when he makes the statement about, a president, raising an army to invade his own country. I just wonder what was, what would Lee have done? Would Lee have invaded the South? And if part of me says him being a Southerner says no, part of me saying him being a military man, it wasn't. He would have. I know his loyalty lies with Virginia, so I'll be glad to see that video when it comes out. When will you have it?
It'll probably be next month, honestly, in October. But yeah, hopefully.
You've made these videos that are just fascinating. I mean, I can't tell you. I watch them one or two a night. Are you ever, or maybe you already have, are going to write a book?
Yes. Well, I'm going to turn my dissertation into a book. And so that's one thing I do want to discuss on here, if nothing else, to help me focus my thoughts on my dissertation, which is I'm writing the last chapter right now. So whenever it's done.
Is that what you're talking about?
Say that again.
When you said that your thoughts, you mean the show that we do?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss my dissertation on what I'm writing about.
And I'm so glad that to me, I'm so glad I'm able to offer you some type of help uh, in this, because I mean, you're, like I said, you're so fascinating to me. I'm glad that I'm helping you. Well, me not helping you, you helping yourself by discussing this. I hope I've been a good interviewer to you, asking you tough questions and helping you think on it during this. But I'm so glad that you said that. That makes me feel really good. That but sorry, I didn't mean to digress. But
no, it's good, especially for a historian, to be asked these questions, because we need to be able to articulate these things to everybody. One thing I've always kind of not liked about academic historians, even though I am one, is that we kind of write for ourselves, and this little group of people that we talk to in academia. And I don't like popular history. These journalists who write history books, but they sell thousands and thousands of copies because they have better publicists, but they're not good books, not in the least. But these historians who do wonderful work, we write for such a small audience. I never wanted to do that. It's one reason I started my channel, was I want to branch out. And so when you listen to my videos, much of that research is coming from academic books. I'm just condensing it, taking away all the the big jargon, the big words, and not simplifying it down, but making it digestible in smaller bites so that everybody can understand the importance of every one of these historical works. That's important to me. And so by doing these interviews, I'm able to focus my attention on certain topics and be able to answer these questions. And I know when I finish the dissertation, I have to defend it against a committee of 4 professors. And these questions are going to help, you asking these questions are going to help me be able to think quickly on my feet and be able to answer them so I can pass and receive my PhD.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you told me that, because I'm going to come up and I'll tell you this after it's over with. I'll talk to you after we cut filming. I'll come up with tougher questions for you, to see if I can help you with it. Because I'd love to see you do great with this book. I don't know if you plan on teaching ever again, but I mean, if you don't, the students are missing out on great, because just your videos, I've learned more Civil War stuff than, and I'm a Civil War buff, and I know 1% of what you do, but listening to the stories you tell, I'm just enthralled in all of them, and I can't get enough of them. I think you're the best out there. And once I got because I tried, I was after you forever. I didn't think I was ever gonna get you to give me an interview, and then once I got you back on these shows, and every 2 weeks, and it just seems like they keep getting better and better and better. And hopefully they continue to. But once I got you on there, I mean, it's just been I've loved every minute of it. The 2 weeks go by. At first, it seemed like it couldn't get there quick enough, and now they go by so fast. So by Friday night, I'm pumped. Show. I'm sorry to hold you over tonight. I know we try to keep it at 30 minutes because what I found, and I know what you found too, 5, 10, 15 minutes is about what you hold people with, and with videos. But I thank you so much for doing this with me, because I've enjoyed it. But do you want to do that next time? The Lee and Jackson with the Blitzkrieg?
Oh, if I can do the research and
Well,
be able to do it thoroughly, I would happily do that.
And I don't want to put you on something where it's going to constrain you. Is there something that you didn't have to put in a whole lot of research that you could do, and we could do that topic and save that one for something else?
Well, let me think about it. We'll come up with something. I'll let you know something before the end of this week is up, and so we can have a game plan for the next time.
And sounds good. And I'll talk to you later. And can't wait till next week.
That sounds great, buddy.
Okay. So anyway, there. had to be careful when I said that's great. There's one guy on there, and I don't know if you've listened to him or not. He's a great storyteller, and he's got a couple of books that he's written. Dan Corn, and fascinating storyteller. I love listening to him. I think you're a better storyteller. I love listening to yours, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings when I said you're the best. Because I think I hurt his feelings saying that. But you're the best one that I've ever heard. By far, when it gets into Civil War history. I mean, I could listen to you, all night long telling stories.
I really appreciate that. That's a big compliment. I've been trying to hone my skills and doing research and doing all kinds of studying for the PhD. People are really they don't understand what a PhD student has to go through, and there's a reason we almost have to write for our own little audience because we get trained so well in doing that.
The thing with you, like I asked the other day, when I said, "Are you a Confederate sympathizer?" And you said no. You can't tell if you're a Confederate sympathizer or you're not. I wouldn't know, which side you lean to, listen to you, and that's what I think makes you such a great storyteller. Because I've heard you tell stories through both sides, and that's wonderful. There's a guy tonight. He said, which really pissed me off. He said I didn't hand out rules fairly, and I said, do you know how many people I've ejected for calling Sherman a war criminal? Do you know how many people I've ejected for saying they was glad Lincoln got shot? I said, and what he got mad because people know how much I love Lee, and they know how much I love Coach Saban. And the 11th and 12th unspoken rules is thou shalt not say any ill words against General Lee or Coach Saban. And it's a joke, I'm not, it's a joke. And this guy makes a big deal about, oh, well, the rules run fairly because you can't say anything about Lincoln or Lee. And I'm like, can you not take a joke? Do you think I'm going to kick somebody out because I said I'm one of Lee's harshest criticizers in certain things? I blame him. I don't blame Stewart at Gettysburg. I blame Lee. I blame Lee on a lot of things. So I'm not going to kick somebody out. What the things that make me mad is when they go after Lee. And I know he did commit treason, but I don't want to hear that. I get mad when I go after him about that. But, so I try to stay out of the Lee conversation so my bias and emotions don't get involved in it.
Well, one of the bigger compliments I ever got from one of my students was, they're like, "What political party are you?" I said, "You've not figured it out yet?" I said, "No." I was like, "Well, good. You're not supposed to. Because if you know what my politics are, you're either going to completely agree with everything I say, no matter what I say, like if you agree with my politics, or if you don't agree with my politics, you're going to tune me out and not listen to anything I have to say." So by me creating this very neutral platform where I just take it at face value and just give you the facts, there's nothing weird. I'm not twisting anything around. I create that kind of place, and that's what my goal is. And so hearing you say that and hearing my students say that really helps me out mentally with that, because that's a constant battle trying to stay that neutral way a lot of times.
And I can see that because just in everyday conversation, when stuff comes up, it's not going to take long for people to figure out where your politics is. You've seen some of my posts. I'm a conservative. There's also things I'm very liberal on. I'm a person. I don't think there should be any cut and dry toe the line, if that makes sense. In things like that. So I like you said, I try to give that. A lot of my stuff and I'll go ahead and key you in on this. I make a lot of controversial posts, and what I do is I do that for a reason. I go pop a bag of popcorn and pop open a drink, and I sit there and I watch the fireworks and laugh. I may not mean anything that I say. I may believe some of it, but half my friends are liberals, half are conservatives, and I will make a post, and then I will sit there and I will watch them go at it, and it is pure entertainment.
I'll quote Chamberlain off of Gettysburg: "You're a ghoul."
Who did he say that?
He said that to his brother. I'm trying to.
Tom?
Tom, when he told him about taking the coffee off the dead soldiers, the departed souls, they had no use for it.
Oh, they no use for no more. Yes.
Chamberlain said, "You're a ghoul."
But one of my favorite ones, and I heard this was actually a true line because I didn't believe this at first, but the guy who got me that book, Gettysburg, God rest his soul, he knew how much I loved it, and he said, "You've got to read The Killer Angels," because he knew how much I loved it. He said, and I read it the first night, and but in the movie that part and I read that Shahara took a lot of the primary papers and to try to write the book, but I love that part where they're doing that, they're spreading out the line, and Chamberlain goes, Andrew goes, "How are you, sir?" And he goes, "Yeah, a bit worn." He goes, "I'll tell you this, sir, the boys are putting up a hell of a fight." He said, "They are indeed." Now, my favorite one, and I don't know why, I do not know why this is my favorite line, my favorite part of the movie, and I still will never figure it out. It's when Kemper is riding back on the horse, and Armistead says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "You got to come up low. You got to come up and help. In God's name, they're flanking us and they're firing down into us." And Armistead heads for the trees, head up for the center. We'll call for double quick. We'll go around double quick. Nobody waits. Everybody goes.
It gives cold chills.
Yeah, but it gives me cold chills. But just the way, the way when he says that, when he goes, "Head for the trees, head up for the center." I mean, it's just like, I just can't explain what it is. When he goes over the top, I love that too. Let's move out. Because I tell somebody, I always tell people jokingly, I said, when they get to the fence and that kid's kneeling down, Armistead says, "Come on, boy, what do you think of yourself tomorrow?" And he goes, "Virginians, come with me." I said, and they start going over the hill. I said, or the fence. I said, at that point, I said, I'm on my feet, fist pumping. And I said, when they break the line, I said, by that time, I'm screaming and cheering. And, when he says, "Turn the days," and the fight breaks out, I said, then I'm fist pumping. And then next thing I know, I'm just ejected. And, I keep thinking it's going to turn out different, but it never does. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go. The one part that I think that they should have kept in the movie that would have explained the second day better is when Lee was talking to Ewell, Early, Hill, and I can't remember who the other general was. And, he says, General Longstreet says we should move around to the right and interpose our army. And, and he says, "General, if we cannot maneuver and we cannot, attack, in the face of the enemy, or we cannot maneuver and we cannot withdraw, we must attack in the face of the enemy." That should have been included in that movie.
Yeah, I've seen those that edited that. What was it called? The director's cut.
Director's cut. I watched all of that one, and the other one, and sorry, and I'll let you go, is I think they should have put in, and it's my favorite part, and it was actually, he didn't say it then, but it was in a letter written 15 years later, is when Old Man Trimble says, "Tell him I send his compliments, and the men I have the honor to command this day cannot take that position, then all hell can't take it." Mm-hmm. But who did you like better, before I let you go, Sheen or Duvall?
I do like Sheen better. It seems like sacrilegious, but I think he was better.
People have said that to me too, but I've told them, and I promise I'll let you go after this, but I've told them, I said, I've read so many books about Robert E. Lee that I know him so well. Sheen nailed that character from the look that he gave when he was mad to his reaction. Everything in it, Sheen nailed him to a T.
I think so too. It's especially with his anger.
When Longstreet was arguing with him about wanting to move around, and he was looking through those glasses, and the look that he cut him with his eyes, and Longstreet didn't say another word. I said, that was him. That was him. Because they said his look would stop you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thanks, Lucas. I know you got to get up early in the morning, man, and walk 15 miles around the park. And I don't know how you do it in that heat, brother. Because it would kill me.
I'll be in a Civil War uniform too.
Man, how hot is that thing?
It gets pretty warm, but you do get used to it. I will say that.
I mean,
I've done it for 17 years. So
even when I was in the Army, I mean, I could never get used to a winter uniform, and I know it was nowhere near as hot as that. And I don't know how you do it, but have fun tomorrow, and maybe one day I'll get up there and get to see you in the mountains. But I'll look forward. We'll talk later, and I'll get this fixed up, and and let me ask your advice on something real quick, because I'm afraid to do this. Should I get a refurbished computer? Because I see these computers on Marketplace, $150, $200, and I'm afraid I'm going to end up getting a computer with child pornography and getting 20 years in prison. That'd be my damn luck. But somebody told me to get a refurbished computer.
If you get a refurbished computer from a reputable dealer, they wipe it completely before they ever do any refurbishing. So you wouldn't have to worry about that.
All right. Now, as far as like what I'm wanting to do, like with the videos, what type of a computer should I get?
That's an even tougher question.
I guess I can go to Best Buy and ask them.
I prefer HP. It's always worked great for me. I hate Apple products.
I don't like Apple either.
And
HP, is there a certain number with HP, or is it just HP?
To get a very high functioning HP, they'll know what you're talking about. If you go to like a Best Buy or something, just say you want a very powerful HP computer, and they've run the best for me. I absolutely love the HPs. I've had them. I've never had anything but an HP.
This is refurbished.
And refurbished, yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to be in there and come out with $5,000 and lights and cameras and action and and all that kind of stuff. But I won't. But I've got the channel's growing up enough, and I'm getting people that I want to get higher quality videos like stuff you've got. I think that will just help me to get up, because I want to get to 1,000 subscribers, because I think that's something about when you get to 1,000 subscribers is when you get credibility, so to speak.
Well, you get to monetize videos.
Yeah. Yeah. True. That's a good point. But again, I'm sorry to keep you up so late, man, because I know you got to get up early. Thanks again for this. I look forward for 2 weeks, and I can't wait till we talk again.
That sounds great. Me too, buddy.
Hey, good talking to you, Lucas.
Good talking to you. Bye.
Let's see. Yeah.